So what does an affordable care model look like in practice? I mean, that is, other than why do we do it, that is the next most obvious question. How do we do it? What does this look like? How do we be successful doing this? Is this a sustainable model? And I can tell you in the beginning, I wasn't so sure. I didn't know if this was going to be a sustainable model. There's one thing I probably should have said in the first piece that I didn't say here. And this does, we're going to talk a little bit about marketing and some things like that in this video, but this was a philosophical difference. It was not setting rates, because that's, the question. How do I set my rates? Where do I set my rates? It was not setting rates to the maximum the market would bear. It was setting rates to the minimum that was a sustainable, profitable model. Underline that. Still sustainable, still profitable as a business model that allowed access to the greatest number of people. And it's a different business philosophy. It doesn't mean that it's a loser philosophy, though. And I think it's one of the paradigms that we're seeing now shift, and I hope NDs in general, we hope make that shift. We don't always have to set the rates at the most the market can bear. I mean, that's classic capitalism. That's okay. It's fine if that's what you want to do, if what someone does, goods, services, etc. But there's another way to do it. And that's to say, not what is the most, but what is enough? What is enough that I am still happy and earning and profitable and sustainable? I said this in the first video. No sense of a poverty mentality here. Where is the model? Where are the set of rates that allow this to be the optimizing of that? It doesn't feel good to not include people in your practice. It feels great to include people in your practice. How do we set that? And we'll get into some of the marketing here. And here's a classic marketing concept, and it's one of price elasticity. Price elasticity is a very simple concept which says at a certain price point, people just don't engage that service, period. And what companies, goods, and services are always trying to do is set their price so that you optimize both the number and the amount you can charge for it. And here's what this model does really well. It says any price is okay, which means that's never a barrier to access. One thing this model does better than anything else is it removes the primary barrier to access to naturopathic medicine, which is financial. And you can go in all kinds of directions talking about why that is and why that shouldn't be, right? So many times we hear that argument, well, it shouldn't be like that. If someone can afford a pair of shoes, they can afford an hour with me. Sure they can. Great, I say this all the time. Great, congratulations, you're right. You don't get any points for being right. You haven't solved any problems by being right. You just happen to be right. We're meeting people. There are two fundamental truths of being an ND. One is you have to meet people as they are. It's not an option. If you don't, it doesn't work. What we're doing by offering an affordable care model is we're actually starting before we've even met them to meet them where they are and say, I know I'm worth $200 an hour. You don't. So I could spend a lot of time trying to convince enough people that I am. Or I could just say, whatever your value position is, that's cool with me. Oh, you know what? It doesn't make me feel less of a person or a practitioner. If you only think I'm worth $40 for an hour, I'm still cool. That's still okay. I don't feel bad about myself as a person. And you know what? I feel great about myself as a practitioner because probably I've helped you. And like we said in the first video, when the offer is made with abundance, it is without fail returned with abundance. So we can kind of bring some of that, that nice sounding philosophy we talked about, and we can bring it down to real business words, and we can say when you offer an affordable care model, you're doing two things really well. You are optimizing price elasticity. You're removing a barrier, the main barrier to access of your services. And two, this is along the same lines, I mentioned this statistic, at least I don't know if it's still true, I assume it's probably still true, but when I started out, I looked this up, and 15% of the population of Toronto, which is about 5+ million people broadly, had the income or the coverage to see a full fee ND. And you could say, as maybe, I won't say you should, but you could say, I didn't get into this just to treat that 15%. I got into this to treat everyone. Sure, that's great. That feels good. You could also say this. This is part of why I didn't have to do a lot of marketing. All the NDs out there, were competing for that 15%. The other 85% of the market, no one was competing for. It was really wide open. And so you could say, well, that's just smart business strategies. To say, here's a huge segment of the market that maybe they can't afford $200, but maybe they can afford $100. Lots of people can afford $100. You know, that's a pretty good value proposition. And so now you've got that access to a market that in this case really isn't being accessed, and therefore you can gain entry to that market. And I'll use some business speak in this section because what we want to talk about is how do I make this real? And sometimes, you know, we love things that feel good in our heart, but we have to also be able to understand business components. Here's the most, I meet with new practitioners all the time. Here's the thing that I say most commonly. All successful businesses, all of them, 100% of successful businesses have one thing in common. They all solve a problem. No matter what you're doing, you start with the question, what problem am I solving? Do enough people have this problem that this is a sustainable, viable business? And are people willing to pay a sustainable amount to have this problem solved? Business is actually not much more complicated than that. That's maybe a simplification because I know you're taking a full business course and there's a lot to talk about, but that part never changes. All successful businesses solve a problem. Here's the question. What problem do you solve? As a naturopathic practitioner, hopefully you're helping someone solve a health problem. That's a problem we know people have. It's a problem we set out to solve. That's great. Another problem people have is they can't afford to see a naturopath. Our model, the affordable care model, solves that problem right away. And we do a handful of other things. It also solves a bunch of other problems that I think are important. They may not be individual problems, but it solves the problem of barriers to access to care, like we talked about in the first video, that they're real. They sure are real, and we're learning. We're finally almost coming to grips with the fact that those are a major thing that is creating the disparity and the disequity, and part of the problem that we solve. And I'll even say this, kind of directly. I'm very proud of the fact that and we have several practitioners at our clinic that are doing this. I'm very proud of the fact of how diverse our community, the people that come and see us is. We've got everybody, literally everybody, every group. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe there's a group, but we try to make sure we set it up, and our community is a beautiful, diverse, mixed group. And we hear this as positive feedback all the time. People say, I feel comfortable, I feel welcome here. And I do. I believe it. I believe that is foundationally important. Sure. And now we've got some evidence that also says businesses that do that well are more successful. Make sure you include everyone. It's always been immensely important. It's now starting to be talked about as immensely important. And offering an affordable care model does that. It does that very well. It shouldn't be true, but it is. There are many communities that we know don't have the resources. We know the average income is considerably lower, and it puts ND services really out of the range. And again, that gets us back to that health disparity question. And I believe we have to be part of the solution to that. And if I'm drifting back into philosophy, sorry, but I am. From a business perspective, though, again, we can make the case that the more inclusive any good or service, the more inclusive a product is, the more inclusive a business is, the more diverse it is, the more equitable it is, the stronger it's going to be. The better it serves its community, and the stronger it's going to be. Here is some other important things to think about, though, because you can't run, how many businesses fail? About half of businesses fail. I meet with practitioners and sometimes other business people, and I'll challenge them. I'll say, okay, most businesses fail, and you can watch them be like, and you see that defiance, that entrepreneurial defiance. You need it, but also you need to have some thinking there too. And then you ask the question, most businesses fail. Why isn't yours going to fail? Why are you going to succeed? What makes you think you're actually better than average? What makes you think you could beat the averages? Why are you so special? Those are the questions that help you build a sustainable and profitable and successful and happy business or practice, whatever it is that you're doing. And so it's key. It's key to be able, again, gets us back to solving problems. Here's something that I tell to NDs as practitioners. We can look at it as a business, we can also look at it as practitioners. You are your product. You have to define and you have to refine the definition of that product. And then you have to, sometimes it even takes courageous awareness, because this is really important. It's not who do we want to work with, it's who wants to work with us. And I challenge the fourth years that I work with, I say, great, define and refine your product through your fourth year. At the end of the year, answer this question. Who consumed you the most? Who were your actual natural consumers? Because those are the people for whom you're really solving a problem. And you might not actually like that. You might say, well, I want to work with these people, but these people wanted to work with me, and you've got to reconcile that. You either need to change this, or you need to actually reconcile the two and ask. In fact, it's one of the best things you can do. Ask the question, why did these people like me? Why are these my natural consumers? What is it about me as my product that makes these my natural consumers? Understand that, accept that, awareness, acceptance, action, 3 A's of behavior change, incidentally as well. You then take that and you put it near its natural consumers. What does this have to do with affordable care? You can run an affordable care clinic pretty much anywhere, because everywhere has a majority of people that will be in need of those services. But there is value to making sure that you match your consumer. Who's the consumer of an affordable care clinic? That's a great question. And I can say this, it isn't mostly the same 15% that most NDs are accessing. And I can say that because I have lots of ND friends. We hang out, we talk about our lives and our practices, and the things that they say as the challenges that come up for them don't come up for me at all. They'll say, oh, don't you hate it when, this happens in practice? And I'm like, that doesn't ever happen. I listen to them have a conversation. I'm like, that doesn't ever happen in my practice. So I have come to recognize that the groups are different. Doesn't mean there's no overlap. Certainly there's at least a reasonable amount. But the people that I see using an affordable care model, and maybe this is part of why I like it, they're actually mostly people more like me. They tend to range from, I don't see, and it doesn't mean that you can't, but an affordable care model is not for the lowest SES. It doesn't mean it can't be, but it is different, and I think that's important as well. If no one paid anything, it would not be a sustainable model. It would need to be a charity, and I think it's great. That's not what I'm talking about building here, and that's not really what we've built. What we've built is a sustainable practice model that is open to everyone, but it's mostly these people, this group. It's not mostly the very, very rich, and it's not the impoverished or street involved. It's pretty much the block in between. If we divide it into quintiles, it's not number 1 and it's not number 5, it's 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4 that we mostly see. And I would even say it's predominantly 3 and 4 if I were to, I've never really broken it into quintiles like that, but I think that actually checks out. Here's another challenge, or here's a challenge, because this is, what are the challenges of doing this? Rents only go one direction. Might be a couple of exceptions, but I haven't come across them yet. And I wasn't when I started. I wasn't, in fact, for the first 7 or so years of practice. I wasn't the clinic owner where I am now. Previous owner left. I took it on. I didn't even want to take it on, but I did. And the rents as a clinic owner don't go down. Somewhere along the line, someone is paying a fixed amount of money in a mortgage or rent or whatever it is, and they have to make sure that the business that is in their space is enough, or they're not sustainable. And so that is a challenge. That's a real challenge. And I mention this because sometimes I have students who are really keen on this, and then they struggle because they're looking around for a clinic, and the clinic wants a high split or wants a rent, and sometimes the clinic even says no. I know this is really hard on the heart to hear. The clinic says no, you can't do an affordable care model because you're not going to generate enough revenue doing that. I get it. I understand people have to pay their fees and all those things. I don't want to speak negatively of clinic owners, but I would challenge those same clinical owners to say, okay, if you've got someone who believes in this, and if hopefully we can agree this is something that's worthwhile, hopefully, then get on board, help support that person, try to help also be part of the solution. And I will say, for the most part, clinic owners do try to find ways. But rents really only go in one direction, and the direction is up. And that can become a real challenge. The other challenge, I think, is less of one, but certainly is a fear factor, is, am I going to be okay? Am I going to make enough money doing this? I believe, and my experience suggests, the answer to that is yes. The average amount that I earn per hour of seeing a patient is about $80. That's not the most that I get paid. It's not the least that I get paid, but the average has been, for probably about 4 or 5 years now, the average has been about $80 per, and that's like in my pocket, $80 per patient hour that I see. Is that the maximum I could generate? Probably not. 10 years in practice, I could probably go to a fancy clinic. I've been around, I've built up enough practice. I could probably turn more of a profit than that. Is it enough though? It sure is. It sure is. It's enough for me. And if that's not enough for you, that's okay. That's fine. Rich people need care too. But the reason this is an affordable care video is they're mostly getting it. The people who are not getting it are the other people. And what we're trying to talk about is how to build a model that is sustainable and profitable that allows that access. What does it look like in practice? So what do we actually do? So I've mostly been speaking kind of about one-on-ones, but one of the biggest things that we do now, we've been doing in this case, is now 10 years old, is we started a walk-in acupuncture clinic. Sometimes it's called community acupuncture. We run that 6 days a week. 6 days a week, there are usually about 4.5 to 5 hour shifts. People walk in, and in that 5 hours, so usually that's around $25 to $50 that people leave. In this case, they actually put it in an envelope, and they put it in a teapot, and it's actually completely anonymous, which I think is great. And sometimes they see 10, 15, 20 plus is not uncommon people in that 4.5 to 5 hours. And I can tell you for sure, they're making quite a good hourly rate if you kind of do the math on that. And so, is it sustainable? Yes, it's sustainable. So we do one-on-one visits, we do walk-in acupuncture, and for the last 3 years now, I've been doing a walk-in ND clinic. That one's a little more challenging because I do have to use students basically to kind of help do that, and it works pretty well. We do it as an externship, and there's a nice dynamic there. But that also, and the hourly amount still came out to, it was a little bit, it was in its first 3 years, it was probably closer to 60, but then in its last year, it was more like 80 per hour was the usual, or close to the, maybe 75. Be honest. 75 was the average. And that's enough. Is it enough for you? That's your decision. It's not my decision. Is it enough for me? It is enough for me. You do what you want. But is it sustainable? Yep. Acupuncture clinic's been running 10 plus years. We're the oldest now acupuncture clinic in the city of Toronto. That's not bad. What does it look like? Those are some of the ways that it looks like. What does it look like for you? That's a great question. And I think it's one where there's still room to discover what that looks like. And I think there are still probably some great things, some great ideas. There are some great thinkers for sure among the group of people that have watched this video. I'm absolutely confident there are some great thinkers, there are some creative people, and there are some passionate hearts. Set them free. That would be my advice. What do you do next? You go for it. And what does that look like? Well, here's it can look like a lot of different things because there are a lot of different scenarios. And I made the offer in the first video. I'll reiterate it again now. If I can be of any support, just send me an email. Give me a call. Pickrell, Pickrellnd @gmail.com. I'm not going to give you my phone number on the video, but you can find it. It's out there. Standing offer to any practitioner who wants to help, who wants to make affordable care part of their practice. I am happy to do whatever I can. There are very creative ways to do it. Go for it. That's my closing statement. Be a part of the solution and go for it.